You probably think you know what alchemy is, but you don't. Let me tell you about it. In 1617, a German physician named Michael Mayer published one of the strangest books ever printed. He called it Atalanta Fugiens. Inside of this book were 50 engravings, and each one of them came with a motto and a short poem and a piece of music written in 3 different voices. And I think it's because Mayer apparently wanted us all to sing our way through alchemy. And I've actually made a song about it that's in the description below. But the Emblem 21 is one of the most interesting ones that I just can't put down. And I want to tell you about the instructions of it. It reads like a riddle told by a geometry teacher who's literally lost their mind. Make of the man and woman a circle. Of that circle, a quadrangle. Of the quadrangle, a triangle. And of the triangle, a circle again. And then you will have the stone of the philosophers. And that's it. That's the recipe. There's no mercury or pea in a jar or furnace temperatures. There's no secret mineral from a mountain in Bohemia. It's literally a man, a woman, and 4 shapes drawn in sequence. And people have tried to give their fortunes, their lungs to find this philosopher's stone as a substance. Kings funded laboratories. There were men that breathed in lead vapor for decades, chasing red powder that would turn base metal into gold and extend life past its natural border. And the whole time, one of the most famous alchemical texts in Europe was sitting there saying, the stone is made out of geometry and a human pair. So here's the question I want to carry through this whole episode. What if the stone was never a thing or a substance you find at all? What if it's a diagram or a frequency? And what if that's the frequency of how a human being truly becomes whole? So I want you to stay with me because I'm going to take you from 1617 engravings through a prayer that you already probably know by heart, depending on your religion, and then through a controller, probably sitting next to your television, and then into a 6-pointed correction that I had to end up drawing myself. And at the end, I'm actually going to hand you something you can do tonight to change the alchemy of your reality. So let's get into it. First, let's be honest about what alchemy really is, because there's a cartoon version of it that truly gets in the way. The cartoon says alchemy was failed chemistry practiced by greedy men in pointed hats. The real history is way messier, and I'll be honest with you, way more interesting. The tradition moved through Alexandria in earlier centuries, through the Arabic-speaking world where it picked up rigor and a new vocabulary. And then it went into medieval Renaissance Europe, where it filled courts and monasteries, and at every stage it carried more than one meaning at the same time. And there were actually some practitioners that generally worked metal and crucibles trying to figure this whole thing out. Some were after medicine, some were after elixir, some were after the extension of health. Some treated the laboratory as real but secondary, a mirror of the inner operation. And centuries later, readers came along and said the whole thing was psychology wearing a lab coat. Before we go any further, I want to be real careful because it's really tempting to draw one clean line from ancient Egypt straight to your therapist's office and call it a secret unbroken lineage, which that's not true. What the record does support, however, is way stranger. Generation after generation in different languages, in different empires, people kept using the same operation on matter to talk about the transformation of a person. The furnace kept becoming a metaphor whether or not the man standing at it wanted it to. In 1938, a man named Israel Regard, you may have heard of him, who worked as Aleister Crowley's secretary and later published the Rituals of the Golden Dawn, wrote a book actually titled The Philosopher's Stone. And then he takes 17th century alchemical texts and reads them psychologically and ritually as maps of inner work. Regard did not invent that move. He inherited an old suspicion and said it literally out loud. And I'll tell you what the suspicion was. It was that lead was never only lead. So I want you to hold that suspicion and come back to Mayer's shapes with me. You have the circle, the square, the triangle, then a circle again. All right, what the heck are they doing? And here's the thing about these shapes. They don't have one fixed meaning, and anyone who tells you they do is literally selling you something. But there are readings that keep surfacing across many traditions, and I want to give you the 3 that I find most useful. The circle keeps showing up as unity, wholeness, no beginning, no end, no corner to hide in. When Mayer says, start by making of the man and woman a circle, one available reading is that the work begins upon a union. 2 become one field before anything else can happen. You think about that with childbirth, you think about that with marriage. Look at the whole story of Mary Magdalene and Yeshua, which we can talk about later. Now let's get into the square. It keeps showing up as embodied order. There are 4 elements, 4 directions, 4 limbs. There's 4 chambers of the heart, if you want to get like really biological about it. 4-fold structure is how wholeness touches the ground. Even we live in a space of 3 dimensions of space, as well as 1 dimension of time, so it's a 4-dimensional reality that we are in. And a circle also is useless for building a house. The square, however, is the circle agreeing to have edges, agreeing to show up in matter, in a body, in a schedule, and truly in your life. Now let's talk about the triangle. The triangle shows up as reconciliation. There's 2 points of tension and a third point that resolves them. I'm not doing the Illuminati thing right here, but there's 2 points of tension and 1 point that resolves them that gives it base, right? The thesis and antithesis, right? The thing that's born between them. So the threeness is what happens when opposites stop fighting and start producing something that neither one of them could produce on their own. I want you to think about the Trinity. I want you to think about the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. All right. If you put those things together, this is where creation starts to happen. And I'll tell you this, I'm far from the first person to read the shapes in this way. In the 19th century, Eliphas Levi, a French occultist who basically invented the modern image of the magician, used the triangle, circle, and square as elements of his Kabbalistic system in transcendental magic. If you go grab the book, you've probably seen whole Baphomet on the front and everybody freaks out and leaves it alone, but that's not what it is. And Levi described the philosophical stone as square in every sense that we could imagine. Square meaning honest, four-cornered, load-bearing, balanced, right? The stone you could actually build on top of. I want you to think about Mecca. Crowley and the Golden Dawn magicians inherited and reworked this whole symbolic inheritance in their own direction. And I'll leave their systems to them because we're not getting into that. But the point is the shapes were never decoration. They were an argument about what a finished human truly looks like. So Mayer's sequence starts to read like a sentence. Union becomes embodiment. Embodiment becomes reconciliation. Reconciliation becomes a higher union, the second circle, truly the one that you earned. And the stone is the whole sentence that's spoken in geometry. Now, I need to bring in a book, and I'm going to speak about this honestly, because this is where a lot of teachers in my lane get real sloppy. In 1908, there's a book that appeared called the Kybalion, credited to 3 initiates, whose identities remain genuinely a fun argument, but we're not going to go down that path right now. The Kybalion presents 7 principles it calls hermetic: mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, karma, which they also call cause and effect, and gender. And here's the real part. The ancient hermetic writings, the Greek and Latin texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, did not contain that tidy 7-item list. The list as a list we know today is a 1908 artifact. What the ancient material does carry is the correspondence idea, most famously in the Emerald Tablets, whose language about the above and below got condensed over centuries into the phrase everybody knows, as above, so below. So when I use the 7 principles, I'm using a modern instrument. I want you to understand the age of the instrument you're hearing so that you don't think it's some old ancient thing. But it's kind of like a telescope made in the last century. It can show you a real star, so we don't discount it. And the Kybalion isn't the only modern instrument on my shelf right now, all right? There's another book that I pay attention to called the Metuneter. This is by Ra'un Nefer Amen. It's a modern Kemetic synthesis that takes Egyptian deities and arranges them on a tree of life framework as stations of human development, all right? It's a serious system, and I've truly learned from it. But it's also a 20th century consideration, remapping something that was ancient into something that can now be a little bit more progressed. And the ancient Egyptian primary sources don't hand you that finished tree any more than the ancient Hermetica hands you the 7 principles. And I'm going to keep pointing this out because there's a whole industry right now selling modern synthesis with a fake antique price tag on it, right? They tell you it's something really old and it's all of this ancient lore. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's not, okay? And that whole lie, and I'm not calling anybody out, but it's wildly unnecessary. So a good map doesn't need to pretend that it's old. It just needs to be truthful, and it needs to actually find a way to get you back home. So I talked a little bit about this prayer that you probably know. I want to talk about an instrument that you probably never expect, and this is the Lord's Prayer. I grew up hearing this prayer recited so automatically that it turned into like a wallpaper in my mind. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, the whole thing. Words worn smooth like the stones of a river, even to the point that nobody even feels their edges anymore. And one day I was sitting with the 7 principles in one hand and this prayer in the other hand, and the two started snapping together like magnets. Matthew wrote down a prayer. The mapping I'm about to give you is mine, so I'm not pretending that it's anything else. And I'm not claiming that the author of Matthew's gospel had the Kybalion sitting under his robe 18 centuries earlier, okay? But what's interesting is when you start seeing truth, it actually rises up in many different ways. Thy will be done is mentalism. The principle that mind precedes manifestation, that intention truly comes before form. Before anything appears on earth, there is a will, a divine mind, an intention. The prayer doesn't start by asking for stuff. It starts by aligning the intention that precedes everything. And every builder knows this order. The blueprint exists before the building. Thy will be done is the blueprint clause. And even in esoteric principles, we talk about there's a blueprint that was actually given by the monad. Now the next one, on earth as it is in heaven. If you say it really slowly, you can hear the emerald tablets underneath it, as above, so below. That's the correspondence. The prayer asks for the pattern in one space to be reproduced in another. Heaven is the pattern, earth is the printout. Whatever else this prayer is doing, it's explicitly a request for two levels of reality to meet and bind. Hallowed be thy name. That's vibration. And I want to be really mindful with this one because this is where people kind of drift into pseudoscience. I'm not telling you a word hums at some healing frequency you can buy on an app. I'm telling you something way simpler and way old. A name is a spoken thing. To hallow a name is to voice it. It's to give it breath and sound, to let it move through a body. On one of my last videos, I talk about what the breath means and how to center that in gratitude. Prayer is truly a vibration in the most ordinary sense. Air, vocal cords, resonance in the chest and the heart. The prayer makes the sacred audible. It insists the holy be embodied in the sound before anything else is requested. Let's go to the next one. Give us this day our daily bread. That's rhythm. Notice the prayer doesn't ask for a lifetime of bread. It asks for today's bread, the present moment, which means you have to come back tomorrow. It means that you're not hoping for something that's not there. You are literally building from right now. The prayer builds a return onto itself, a daily cycle, a daily provision, a daily contact, a present moment gratitude. Rhythm is the principle that brings you back in the present moment where everything flows into its own cycle instead of a warehouse that holds all provisions. So now let's talk about forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. That's cause and effect. Let's look at how precise the wording really is, right? The forgiveness you receive is coupled to the forgiveness you extend. Consequence flows through relationship in both directions. When you release your grip on what's owed to you, something else releases upstream to you. It is stated as reciprocal law. And anyone who has actually forgiven a real debt or has been forgiven one knows it operates like one. Now there's two more. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. That's polarity. Two poles named in one literal breath. Temptation on one side and deliverance on the other. And the prayer is a request to move along the axis between them in a chosen direction, one that you choose. This is why we have free will choice. And I want to say something so that it's not confused. Reading this clause through polarity doesn't shrink evil down into like some simple battery terminal. Evil is so real, it costs people real things in life. Polarity just names the structure of choice. We can choose evil, right? And we can choose deliverance. I want you to understand that every day you're somewhere on this axis and the prayer asks for help traveling it toward the light or toward the darkness. It's completely up to you. And that's number 6, right? And you may have noticed that I skipped the first 2 words of the whole prayer, and I kind of did that on purpose because the 7th principle is gender and it lives in the opening. Our Father, the prayer opens by naming a directive, initiating the Father principle. And the entire prayer bends towards earth, towards the place where will gets done, where bread arrives, where debts get forgiven, where heaven possesses and earth brings forth. In my readings, and this is my symbolic synthesis of this, the prayer holds a generative pair, a directive principle and a receiving manifesting principle. And the kingdom is what they generate together. And let me close this door before somebody takes it where they're not supposed to go. I am talking about principles and currents that run through every human being on earth. I'm not saying men are will and women are dirt, okay? A woman is a full bearer of the directive current and a man is a full bearer of the receptive one. And reducing any woman to a vessel or womb is exactly the distortion I'm going to spend the back half of this episode tearing down. And there's one more piece of honesty about the prayer. If you grew up Protestant, you probably end it with, "For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever." That ending is a traditional doxology, and it's missing from several of the earlier manuscript witnesses of Matthew. Matthew's version and Luke's version of the prayer differ from each other anyway. None of that damages what I just showed you because the mapping never touches the doxology. The 7 live in the body of the prayer, in the clauses nobody dispute. Now let's lighten the room for a little bit because there's a version of this symbol conversation sitting in millions of living rooms right now. I want you to pick up a PlayStation controller or imagine one or Google one. When I first noticed that, my pattern brain went nuts like a switchboard. Myers shapes molded in plastic, literally under 100 million thumbs just tapping at it. So I looked into it and here's what I got to. The designer, Teyu Gotu, explained the symbols himself. The triangle stands for a viewpoint, a head, a direction. The square stands for a document or a menu. The circle and an X are simply yes and no. Sony was not smudging alchemy onto your entertainment center, right? The reason that I bring it up is because watch what those buttons actually do. A sign becomes an input. You press a shape and the world on the screen changes, literally when you touch the shape. And after enough hours, the pressing goes underneath thought and you have sore thumbs and maybe a cramp. Millions of people run circles and squares and triangles through their hands every single day. And the repeated choices shape the players. Their reflexes, their instincts, what their hands do before their mind even catches up. Nobody's controller is rewriting their biology. What I am saying is that a controller is a tiny, honest demonstration of an old idea. Repeated symbolic action forms the person doing the work. The alchemists just wanted to choose the symbols on purpose. So the shapes work and the prayers actually map. And now I have to tell you where the classic diagram started failing me, because if I don't, I'm just another guy scrubbing and polishing the antique like a genie and hoping for another wish to come out of it. The traditional image of this work is the squared circle. The circle and the square nested together. You've probably seen it in Da Vinci's work. And when I sat with it long enough, it read really masculine heavy to me. And that's my personal reading of the image, because even inside of that, there was a triangle that was right side up. But look at what the classic diagram emphasizes. Structure, order, the right angle, the compass stroke of a hand in posing form. Where in that image is the current that receives, that brings forth? The tradition talked constantly about the marriage of opposites, but then drew diagrams where only one spouse appears. So when I sat down to draw the stone the way I actually see it, I reached for a different figure. I looked at the hexagram. I looked at the right side up triangle and the upside down triangle, properly constructed and interlocking. The upward triangle, and I have this on my hand, okay? This is what people ask. People are like, oh, you've got a pentagram or, whatever. I see this as something totally different. The upward triangle is carrying the divine current, the directive structure, and that's what I call masculine. So here on my hand, I've got this side that's masculine. The downward triangle, okay, is carrying the receptive generative current. It's what I call feminine. These become locked together so completely that you can't remove one without destroying the figure. And the boundaries matter because then inside of that, I have a square and a circle, right? That's very balanced inside of this entire structure. So this is the 6-pointed star. You can call it the Star of Solomon. You could call it the Star of David. You can call it whatever you want, okay? It lives across almost every tradition, Jewish, Islamic, Christian, magical, alchemical. And honestly, I've seen it, in Buddhist cultures. I've seen it pretty much anywhere. And it really carries no single fixed meaning across any of those histories. So I'm not telling you that Judaism, because of this star, secretly encodes my system, because it doesn't. And that's how a good idea turns into a bad one. And people start making assumptions. The reading I am using is fire is the upward triangle and water is the downward triangle is one later alchemical reading amongst several. I choose it because it stays cleanly to what I need, all right, in the way that I see it. So the cool thing about this whole process of life is that you can take something and make it make sense to you that it becomes your truth, and then you bring it to the world. This is how any great idea starts. And inside of you, every person carries both triangles. You have current in you that directs, structures, protects, holds a line. You have current in you that receives and brings new things through, and the work is getting them into right relationship. The right relationship has order to it. Structure serves flow. The bank serves the river, and protection serves sovereignty. A man's protection exists to make the people in his care feel safer, freer, and more alive than they'd be without it. The moment protection curdles into ownership or control, it stops being the upward triangle and becomes a cage wearing the triangle's clothes. And here's a way you can test which one you're living, because the two produce opposite evidence. And this is going to be tough for some people. Ask your loved ones inside your protection one simple question. Since I've been standing guard, has your world gotten bigger or smaller? When the upward triangle is doing its actual job, the woman in a man's life takes more risks, speaks more freely, creates more, and sleeps more. The structure gave the river somewhere safe to run past. When the triangle has curdled or has created a prison, she starts editing herself. She checks his mood before she checks her own desire. It's the exact same posture on the man's part, same vocabulary of devotion, but opposite result. Riverbanks and dams are built from the same stone. The difference is whether the water still gets to move. And men, the woman in your life is the water. I'll even give you a piece of my own private shorthand. When I look at the vessel in diagrams, I read its right side as the male side, holding the wall and the structural edge. No historical doctrine anywhere assigns the right side of the triangle to men. Now they will say that the right side is masculine, the left side is feminine. And so some of this is inherited from learnings that I've gotten into. And some of it is just how my own hand learned to configure it. And since I've mentioned my diagrams twice now, let me actually walk you through the page itself, because everything that I've been building, the shapes, the prayer, the two triangle, converges on one drawing. At the center, I draw a squared circle, and this is Mayer's old figure. Inside of it, I write one word, we. Because in my experience, the stone was never forged in an individual. The unified thing at the center is relational consciousness. Two or more centers in genuine union, and I mean real genuine union. We are the word without erasing the differences. If you think about it, a union that deletes one of the people in it is an absorption. And an absorption is just loneliness with company. The real we is two circles holding one field, each one more distinctly itself because the other is there. And if becoming one with someone requires you to become less of yourself, you have not found the stone. You found a solvent. Above the center, I write heavenly energy, and below it, I write earthly matter. And this is the vertical axis of the whole page. Everything above pours downwards as intention and divine flow. Everything below rises as form and the body. The center is where they trade. Then I draw two trinities facing each other. A double trinity. On one side is the Father, Sophia, and the Son. And on the other side, Mother Mary, humanity, and Mary Magdalene. And down the sides, I pair the principles that behave like partners. Karma with polarity. Because consequence and choice of direction are one conversation. Every cause you set in motion lands you somewhere on the axis. And every position on the axis is itself a cause. And I pair rhythm with gender, because cycles and generation are one conversation. Everything the generative pair brings forth arrives in seasons, and every season is pregnant within the next thing. And look at how these pairings sit inside of the prayer we just walked through. Forgive us our debts and deliver us from evil, stand shoulder to shoulder. Consequence and direction in adjacent breaths. Daily bread and our Father hold the other pair. The cycle and the source. The prayer had the pairings before I did, which is so cool to think about. But one name on that page truly deserves her own chapter because she has been completely overridden and not paid attention to. And the reason I say this is because I know what happens when the receptive current gets erased from the diagram. And this is Mary Magdalene. I'm telling you, she just hasn't gotten enough love. She's got a whole church in south of France. She's got a whole grotto up there. There's all these stories and lore, and we don't know anything about it. But we're going to get into it, and we're going to start remembering and uncovering the story that we've forgotten. Here's what the canonical record actually gives us, and I would welcome anybody to challenge this. And it's more than most people think, and less than the movies claim, all right? Luke chapter 8 names her among the women who traveled with Jesus and supported the movement out of their own resources, okay? She was literally a funder, a patron. And John chapter 20 puts her at the empty tomb. She's the first witness of the resurrection and literally hands her the job of carrying that news to the men. The first announcement of the central claim of Christianity was given to a woman to deliver. Now, here's what the canonical texts never call her. They never call her a prostitute. They never call her a wife, even though I will say this. They never call her anyone's sexual partner. The prostitute label came later, and that was in the year 591, where Gregory the Great preached a homily that folded Mary Magdalene together with other women of the Gospels. And the Western Church ran with that whole story for centuries. And you want to know why? Because man was afraid to lose control and surrender and create a safe space at an aspect of accountability. This goes all the way back to Adam, where Adam did not stand behind Eve. Adam pointed at Eve and blamed it on her. And so we have a really messed up relationship with the feminine in this iteration of life that we're in. Now it's time to change that story. The Gospel of Mary presents her as a teacher the male disciples resent and have to be told to respect. The Gospel of Philip imagines the special closeness between her and Jesus. Those texts tell us what those communities saw in her, a figure of authority and intimacy with the source. They are the testimony to her stature and early imagination. It's not necessarily a marriage certificate. For me, I say when they say he was her closest disciple, and then you go to south of France and you see what's there, it's very hard to imagine that she was not his wife. There's even a reading of her name, Magdala, that relates to a word for tower, Mary the Tower. Could be possible symbolism, but it's interesting that Magdala actually means tower, and then we get into Tower of Babel and bringing things together and then looking at Masonic rituals, but that's also another video. So I'm going to keep her distinct from Mary the Mother because they're two different women, two different roles, but the mother is the one through whom the pattern takes flesh. Magdalene is the one who recognizes it, funds it, embodies it, and helps it grow. Sounds kind of like a marriage, doesn't it? On my diagram, she stands as the recovered feminine authority, the witness, the understanding, the relational completion that the squared circle forgot to draw. Now, I'm sure there's skeptics that are watching this, and I'd rather face it than not put something out there, okay? And the objection goes like this. Sean, 7 is a small number and human pattern matching a strong drug. You could map 7 principles onto 7 clauses of almost anything. 7 doors, 7 chest openings, 7 items on a dinner menu, and it proves absolutely nothing. And what I'll say is that if somebody were to throw that out there, I respect it and we'll talk about it. It's not about the mapping, it's the evidence. But what I will say is if you look at our reality, you've got 7 days of the week, you got 7 colors of the rainbow, okay? You got 7 continents, 7 oceans, you got 7 chakras of the body. And all of that from a pattern perspective, okay, derives itself from the reality that we sense and that we see. And the 7, as far as the principles are concerned, were derived in 1908 when the Kybalion dropped. And here's the thing that I want to say. Just because it's not old doesn't mean it's not accurate, okay? Just because it's not ancient doesn't mean it doesn't have legs. That would be like saying you're not real because you're not old, because you're not ancient, all right? It's finding the patterns of yourself as above, so below, as within, so without, and respecting this law of rhythm that you can see across time to where you see how you show up in a similar pattern. So what I want you to do is you can either start with the principles or start with the prayer, okay? And try it for 30 days and see the evidence of how it shows up in your life when you just either walk by these 7 principles and see the patterns or see it within the prayer, whether you're hyper-religious or you're not, it doesn't matter. And if your conduct or your life or your awareness doesn't change, throw it out. And I'll even help you with it if you want, okay? But you are in the laboratory of your life. The lead and the gold are real. The lead is the fragmentation of your consciousness and the reality that you've been living in. The gold is you synthesizing that together, moving beyond the unconscious patterns running your life. Each and every one of us has the ability to move beyond being heavy and dull and toxic within ourselves, and then passing that on to other people. Each and every one of us has the ability to show up as gold. It's not this gold, okay? It is the behavior of how you respond under pressure. It's the person you are at your kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night that matches the person that you are at noon in the daytime. It's the person you are when your wife isn't watching you, when you make a decision to actually go to the club and show up in a way that's in integrity, all right? It's the protection that makes your people in your life more free instead of feeling small. Untarnishable, and it's being untarnished. It doesn't mean that you haven't been tarnished before. It means that you are clean right now, and it means that you are the same in every single room. So if you were to take a prayer in this laboratory, it becomes operational alignment. It's the daily procedure by which the scattered pieces of your life get called back into one field and pointed in the same direction, just like the triangle on the PlayStation controller. So here's the practice, and it takes 10 minutes. Sit somewhere quiet tonight and say the Lord's Prayer 1 clause at a time with the shapes. Start with the circle. Our Father, Breathe and picture the whole circle of your life, everyone in it, one beautiful unbroken field, and hold the generative pair of masculine and feminine, heaven proposing an earth-bringing form. Then the square, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Feel the 4 points of your actual embodied life, your body, your home, your rhythm, and ask that the pattern come down into all 4 corners of what you embody in your life. The height, depth, width, presence of yourself. Then the triangle. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Pick one real tension, one pull pulling at another in your life right now. One debt that's still in your books, and stand at the 3rd point where it reconciles. Release what's owed to you. Choose your direction on the axis. This is where you release judgment and righteousness. Then close the circle again. The 2nd circle is the one you've earned. And sit for a minute in the wholeness you just walked. And notice, isn't the same circle you started with. The first circle was given by the divine. This is the one that you've embodied. The circle, the square, the triangle, and the circle again. You just performed Emblem 21 in the Book of Alchemy. You didn't need a furnace, you didn't need mercury, no red powder, no pee in a cup, okay? The whole operation ran on breath, attention, and a chair in the dark for free. And I'll tell you this, if you do it for 30 days, I want you to watch one thing. Watch what happens to the debts, the ones that are owed to you and the ones you owe. That's the one that actually starts working first, because that's where most of our lead is stored. So if you're looking for abundance, this practice will open that for you. Here's where I want to leave you. Back in 1617, with Mayer's engravings open on a table, a philosopher stands with a compass, drawing his figures around a man and a woman. Underneath him, an instruction waits. Make of the man and a woman a circle, and of that a quadrangle, and of that a triangle, and of that the same circle, and you will have the stone of the philosophers. 400 years of people read that as true chemistry and ingredients that were censored. And honestly, I think it was just always a mirror with instructions attached. The man and the woman are 2 currents inside of you. The circle is the union you enter. The square is the life you build with. And the triangle is the tension that you reconcile inside of. And the final circle is the person who comes out the other side whole and embodied. Protection, who's serving freedom, with we and the all at the center. The alchemist said the stone was the one thing the fire couldn't destroy. So go be that. Thank you, and I love you.